You hear a lot about like trans murder rates, trans homicides or whatever. There is nothing to support that. That's like not a real thing. And it's funny you just looked that up there because somebody in my subreddit, they made a huge post like, I was trying to figure out like how many trans people actually killed. And it doesn't seem like it's this massive like epidemic of trans people.
People have stigmatized mental illness so much, and it's seen as such a negative thing that if you call something a mental illness now, it's like an insult to say that. And of course, there are conservative people who do use it as an insult. So there's
That's kind of weird,
though.
That's behind the times, though, because now it seems like mental illness is like sexy as f. You know, you've got like people on Twitter that have like 7 different like BPD, ADHD, DID, like all this shit. It's like, why the f would you label your shit out here? Like, like imagine like going into your like Twitter profiles, like, oh, I'm type 2 diabetic, and it's like, why the f are you typing this shit? It's so weird.
People getting millions of followers on TikTok just based on these mental disorders and exhibiting those symptoms. Yeah, we did a whole episode on TikTok Tourette's.
Very, very, very weird. Very romanticized. Very creepy and not good. Yeah,
it's like that when that Fault in Our Stars movie came out about like these 2 kids with cancer falling in love, and then all these people were like wishing they had cancer and all this stuff. And now it's sort of that just happening on a large scale because of social media. Yeah. But okay, Matt Walsh had this moment on Joe Rogan, and I'm curious, we'll watch it first, but if you've had any moments like this through the span of your career doing this.
Never.
Yeah, let's watch it.
How many people have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, millions.
Are you talking about hormone blockers?
Yeah.
Millions of kids have been on hormone blockers, really?
I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on that, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
It says it's kind of undercounted, but
that would be a big undercounting.
Less than 1,000 people a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, hundreds of thousands.
One order of magnitude down. Okay. So bad. Oh man, that's a yikes.
Yeah, what do you feel? Do you feel any sympathy for a moment like this? No sympathy for a moment like this? I'm curious.
Okay, so here's what I would say. Okay, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
I've made mistakes before. But if you just did a fucking documentary on this, I would expect you to know.
Right.
Be in the ballpark, right?
Right.
Like in my mind, not to be mean. No, actually, I will be mean to Matt Walsh. Fuck this guy. I don't like this guy. Sorry, I don't want to be that mean.
It's okay.
I don't want him to never talk to me in the future if we have the chance to.
Yeah.
But like, if you're doing a lot of research on something, you should be able to ballpark some estimates for like what things cost approximately. If you've done any research or studying, right? Like if somebody was telling me like, oh, like I don't like the new renovations at our local school, and I'm like, why is that? I just think it's a big waste of money. It's like, oh, like how much money do you think they're wasting? It's like, I don't know. I think the last one was like probably like $2 billion or something. And I'm like, $2 billion in your local public school? Are you fucking out of your mind? What are you talking about, right? When people don't even have in their mind like the set of numbers, the interesting thing is you don't actually understand the scale of the problem, right? If I'm answering these too long, you can tell me to shut up.
No,
There's like
keep going.
have you ever heard of something called the Chinese bank robber fallacy?
No.
Okay. If I tell you that there's 1,000 robberies every single day that happen with Chinese people, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I think we feel like it's kind of bad because 1,000 is a big number every single day. But then if I point out that there's like 2 billion Chinese people, 365,000 is less than 1%. It's like a very, very small percentage. Like, well, maybe it's actually not that bad, right? And then the comparison to this is, let's say that I tell you right now, there are 10,000 active police personnel in the United States. And let's say I tell you there are 50 unjustified killings a year from cops to people, right? Do you feel like that's bad? People don't really have a feel for the numbers. Like, okay, did I say 10,000 cops, 50 people? Okay, yeah, that's kind of bad. Okay, what if I tell you that I lied and there's not 10,000 police, there's 20,000?
Yep.
Does it feel like the problem just became half as bad? Because now there's twice as many cops, but there's still only 50 people. What if I tell you the actual number is, it's not 20,000, it's 100,000 cops. Now does that first problem feel insignificant? Now it's almost like, okay, well, let's say that I could have told you in the beginning, we had 50 deaths and 10,000 cops. If we cut that number by 90%, is that like good? Like, would you be happy? Yeah, I'd be good. What if I increase the number of cops by 1,000%, from 10,000 to 100,000? Does it feel like we fixed the problem? Well, no, now it does. Right.
Exactly.
The way that our heads play with the numbers is so fucked. So you have to have a really good accounting of like, what is the scale of everything?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, you don't even really know how bad problems are. Like, I can show you one violent cop killing where a cop is killing a citizen every single week in the United States. That might not actually be that bad.
Exactly.
As horrific as it sounds, like 52 a year in a country of 330 million people, it's never going to be zero.
Yep. It's exactly, when we delved into that issue, we were just trying to look up like how many individual encounters do police officers have a year? It's something like over 300 million.
It's in the hundreds of millions, yeah.
It's insane. So yeah, it puts everything into perspective. Like we saw a tweet from some publication.
I'm just trying to pull it up.
Yeah, it was just like I don't know what I'm going to throw out a random number, like 20 female journalists have been killed since. It's like, dude, like 80% of like the journalists who were killed were men. Are you ever going to acknowledge that? It's just like
it was like 9% of journalists killed were women, and that went up to 17%. And it's like, kill more men.
We won't settle until every journalist who's killed is a male.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
That was just wild, yeah.
Yeah, just the way that we frame our world.
Here's another great example from Axios that this week they put out an article. At least 32 transgender and gender nonconforming people have been killed in the U.S. in 2022. And someone quote tweeted that national murder rate is 6.6 per 100,000. U.S. trans population 1.6 million. Trans murder rate 2 for every 100,000. So they're basically
something that's really rough. Is trans suicidality is definitely a problem, and that's an issue.
Yeah.
However, somebody in my community actually ran into this. It was funny because this claim has been repeated. This is something that I find a lot of times if I repeat a claim a lot, sometimes I'll just look it up because there's a lot of information that we just pass on over and over again, and actually a lot of it is just fucking wrong.
Yeah.
And it's until I actually look it up, like, oh shit, that was totally wrong. You hear a lot about like trans murder rates, trans homicides, or whatever. There is nothing to support that. That's like not a real thing. And it's funny you just looked that up there because somebody in my subreddit, they made a huge post. Like, I was trying to figure out like how many trans people actually killed, and it doesn't seem like it's this massive like epidemic of trans people. You know, there were times in U.S. history where like LGBT people were targeted and people were killed and stuff, but like I don't think over the past like 10 or 20 years, there aren't like all these like trans homicides. Yeah,
right.
It circles back to what I said in the beginning. Our minds are not built for like processing a lot of data and numbers.
Come on, you stupid brain, work!
And when you've got a country of over 300 million people, you can pick and choose like any threads that you want to draw on to create whatever narrative or story that you want, whether it's violent gang members or hardworking immigrants or corrupt, bureaucrats or, local governments doing phenomenal jobs. Like you can build on any story you want. And so the Biden administration almost got caught kind of playing a game here where I'm sure you guys saw where they got fact checked on Twitter.
What?
I think it was like Biden said that like we're doing the largest raise of Social Security of all time.
Yes,
and it was like, well, it just automatically bumps up because of inflation, of course. Yeah,
right. It's unbelievable the way people will try to manipulate things. And so incentivized to do so. I am curious. I don't know that I've ever watched you speak about gender at length or anything like that. What your thoughts are on it. And of course, there's so many different angles. You've spoken out and said you don't think that trans women should be able to compete in female sports, and I think that's going to be widely accepted here shortly because the data and the research around it and just things that we can just empirically view is going to be in support of that. How did you receive a lot of backlash for saying that?
That might have been why I got banned from Twitch. I'm not sure because I don't know. They just say hate speech, but this is always like the silver bullet that kills like both sides' arguments. Because progressives will say trans people should be able to compete in the league they identify with, and then conservatives will say, well, no, they should compete in the league of like their born sex. But both answers are wrong because both answers ignore trans men. Nobody thinks about trans men. Like nobody talks about them on the internet. Right. Even though in real life, I think trans men they're not as common as trans women, but they're closer. But on the internet, it's like 95% trans women.
Yeah.
But like, if you have people competing in their own classes, do you really want like a trans man, so a woman at birth who's now on like testosterone and shit and looks like is it Buck Angel?
Buck Angel,
Do you want that guy competing with women?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
And then for the people on the pro-trans side, it's like, okay, well, if you've got trans men, so AFAB, assigned female at birth people that are now competing with cis men, they're never going to win anything. They're never going to be competitive. They just can't. They went through a female puberty. They're like, that's a huge like disadvantage against other males, biological males in competition. It has to be like its own category.
And it would have to be, a female to male category and then like a male to female category. And then with its own weight classes and stuff within that, which is just, oh my gosh, sounds like such a struggle.
It sucks, but I mean, like, I think that's the only kind of sort of fair way to do it.
Yeah.
And we, for being such a small percentage of the population, goddamn, trans issues have like dominated so many fucking American headlines.
And I think it is part of that, I think there's social contagion happening now, and that's what's making people sort of freak out about it, specifically with young women identifying as male, which is unbelievable. Like the rates at which that is growing is
or non-binaries. It's funny because I went through a whole trans arc on my stream where I was like exploring transitions and stuff, and online, it is like 95% trans women, almost exclusively online. Yeah. But when I started soliciting, the one thing that I found is the best way to learn or maybe it's just 'cause I'm dumb. The best way that I figure out how to learn is to listen to other people and have them tell me their experiences. Because I don't know what the fuck it's like to live your life. So email me and talk to me about it. And I had so many trans people email me. And one thing I didn't know was how many women on college campuses are identifying, not usually as male, it's usually as non-binary. So they get the septum piercing, they get the blue hair, and now they're non-binary, Zazer, or they, them pronouns or whatever. There's two big things. So one is, to some extent, it's normal, even though people don't like to think it. Kids in college campuses are always going to be fucking crazy. It's just, that is like the journey of a child. If you're not an insane fucking activist at 20, you're not living life, okay? Because that's just, because what the fuck are you? You haven't worked a job, you're in college, the whole world is opening up, you're learning about all these horrible issues. It's like, So I expect that to some extent. That's fine, you know?
Yes.
The only scary thing about the trans stuff is there's two weird things that have happened about it. Is that one is it's a potentiality for like drugs and life-altering surgery, which makes that phase a lot more permanent. And two, it's really hard to call those people out on their craziness because it all gets wrapped in gender identity. And now you're transphobic, right? So like 10 years ago, if you've got like all these crazy like goth and scene kids at my, high school, or these like prep kids, or like people going through these like weird punk phases or whatever, like, okay, that's a phase, you're cringe, you're doing whatever, drugs, okay, you'll grow out of it, right? But I can't tell somebody today like, oh, that's cute, you're an AFAB who's now a non-binary with like, okay, you'll grow out of it, because now I'm like an evil, hateful person. So that's the only scary thing, is that when it gets wrapped in kind of like that, the trans sandwich becomes a lot more difficult to kind of like point out like, maybe this is a phase, maybe blah, 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 right? Not to be, and then to get caveat, not to say that all trans people are going through a phase, but there's definitely some weird shit happening at college where, because
I would say the majority, people can get pissed at me for that, but I would say the majority, and I think like, especially with young people.
On college campuses,
Yeah, and then the issue for me is like, then that getting propagated in like younger education, and now we're seeing a lot of young kids struggle with it, and I think that's super messed up. And honestly, I feel like we're going to look back on this period in time and find a lot of young people who have just been robbed of a lot. And in the UK now, there's this clinic that's gotten shut down. It's called the Tavistock Clinic, and I think they have 1,000 families that are suing that clinic for medical treatments that their children have undergone. And that's going to be just so crazy to see. I think it's going to be so devastating, and all because we made ourselves subservient to like, just like dogmatic, makes you feel good, accept everybody for what it is that they say. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's the people hitting on both ends with an ideological hammer when they need like the compassionate screwdriver or something, right? Like, exactly. Yeah, because like the reason why I get bothered by all of the trans people on college campuses, because when I was getting emails from trans people, they were saying that like these spaces don't even feel like they're for me. They're like, I might go into a space like this and I'm trying to figure out like, how can I find the gender affirming care I need? Like, how can I find the drugs I need or whatever? And it's just like 99% of the people there are just like women with dyed hair that are now like non-binary, and they're like, I feel like I can't even like find, and then it's all just like shitting on like cisgender people and like normal society, and that's like the whole community's become that. So
it's like a huge club. It's just a huge club, and I'm ready for it to stop. Like, I think one good thing that Matt Walsh is doing, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is like having states bring down and say, we're not going to take this route with minors below the age of 18 as far as gender affirming care. In what I've read about this, the majority of young people who express any sort of gender dysphoria eventually grow out of it, and typically after they go through puberty and just learn the hormones tamp down a little bit and they learn to accept the body that they're in. There are a few cases of minors where gender reassignment and all that whole process is acceptable just because of how extreme the case is. But I would like to see states sort of come down on the medical interventions as far as minors.
I think it is essential that medical interventions exist for minors. I think that has to be a thing, but I think we just have to go about it in a different way, because there are trans people. Here's the thing. If you are trans, you're going to know most likely when you start going through puberty.
Sure. But
just because you're going through puberty and you feel like you're trans does not mean that you're trans.
Yep.
Right? It's like if A, then B, but that doesn't mean if B, then A, right?
Yeah.
Right. For prop logic. The issue is that there is so much contention on both sides trying to figure out, like, here's what I want. Like, there should be gender clinics that bring your child in and have a critical conversation about their gender. And it has to be critical, because all conversations related to drug therapy and stuff need to be critical. It can't just be supportive or affirming.
Yes.
And sometimes I feel like, especially because I've talked to a few detransitioners now, and even people that are in the community that have transitioned and are pro-transitioning, is that sometimes it feels like people are very they're very reticent to challenge somebody on their gender beliefs because they might, like, the kid might just go to some other clinic or might do something else. And like, yeah. So I think there should be places for even minors with their parents and their doctors, like, working together to figure out like what an appropriate step forward is for them, which might include drug therapy, even as a minor. But it can't just be that you walk in and then you walk out with a bag of Skittles, you know, for estrogen and shit because they want to affirm you and support you. And there's no critical conversation ever.
Yeah, I should clarify. The blind affirmation treatment is what I'm wholly against. And it's unbelievable that, like, we're watching other countries like France, Sweden, Germany, and they're all saying, oh yeah, we're actually taking this from a critical perspective and meeting these children, finding that they grow out of it, and finding that, you know, medical intervention should be your last resort. And then we have people like Rachel Levine, the, like, assistant health secretary, who's already made that decision for herself. Like, let's acknowledge that, saying that children should be just blindly affirmed in whatever it is that they think and feel. And like Matt Walsh says, it's millions of children or whatever. I don't think it's that. I obviously don't think the numbers support that whatsoever. But I think it is going to be a substantial amount of kids who, if we don't nip this and actually come to the table with conversations like this, they are going to be harmed.